My first guest today is Saanich Mayor and CRD Director Richard Atwell. Thanks for your time today, Mayor.
Hello, John.
Appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure.
So listen, when I originally asked you to be a guest, it was going to be in your roles, two of them, as Vice Chair of the CRD Sewage Committee and as a member of the brand new CRD Integrated Resource Management Task Force. But last week, as Saanich Mayor, which is the third hat you wear, you said you'll recommend to your council that it evaluate a made-in-Saanich solution for the liquid waste management plan. So what's your thinking behind that?
Well, as I was writing that annual address for the residents of Saanich, I was looking back on the last 10 years of progress, or in some ways lack of progress at the CRD. It's been since 2006 that the CRD has been at this, looking for a mandated solution to sewage treatment here in Victoria. So I wanted to give an update to the residents of Saanich, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of good news to give. And I thought, while I'm supporting of the process, I had two issues. One was that the cost is simply still too high. In the last year at the CRD, we've largely managed to achieve raising the cost by about $300 million over the previous project. I don't think that's a great achievement to date, and we've got to work a lot harder in our oversight and scrutiny role to bring that cost down. And it's still like a wild cost at this moment. But I felt that reading the frustration of the residents of Saanich and my own frustration, and having watched this closely for a number of years, that if the CRD as a body couldn't get together and get a good solution in front of residents, that it would be incumbent on myself to recommend to council that we evaluate a made-in-Saanich solution. And I didn't define that at all. I didn't define that in terms of sites or technology or even timelines, but basically to say that, you know, by the end of this year, enough is enough. We need to move on with this, and Saanich, with its engineering resources, may be the best way of moving forward for residents of Saanich.
So is it a bit of a plan B for Saanich? The reason I ask that is because it seems, when I follow the file, as you know, fairly closely. So Langford seems to have a plan B, Colwood seems to have a plan B, and if I remember correctly, even Victoria seems to have a plan B, in that if this all goes to, excuse the expression, hell in a handbucket, this is what we're going to do as a sole municipality.
Right.
So is it along those lines?
It is, and I think I might even called it a Plan S at one time, just sort of, you know, quipping a little bit. But it speaks to the problem of the structure that we have down at the CRD. We have a committee of about 17 individuals now, that First Nations are now at the table, and it's a majority vote that moves things forward. And this is our system of democracy and how we make decisions. But when we have such different municipalities geographically, with the structure, whether it's rock they're built on or otherwise, the residents they have, the number of people on the sewer system, the number on septic tank, when we end up with a single plant solution that we're pursuing, I find that it's a one-size-fits-none kind of solution. And that was one of the problems with McLaughlin. If you want to do water reclamation out in the West Shore, you can't do that if you're reliant on a single plant down at Rock Bay. And so I thought for a long time that the multiple plant solution was a way of achieving this, to be able to build something that's purpose-built for a municipality or two or three to share, that would provide those benefits long term. But as we keep pushing to the single site solution as the cheapest solution, we end up with the one-size-fits-none solution.
So is it difficult in providing that sort of leadership for Saanich, with your mayor hat on? Is that at the cost of your leadership responsibilities as vice chair of the sewage committee?
A little bit. I mean, it's the challenge that we have in this region, where we don't elect people to the CRD directly. We have mayors and councillors and go sit at the CRD. So we do have to wear two hats. Ultimately, it's our residents that are paying the taxes, and the CRD essentially wholesales these services through our tax bills. We don't get a CRD tax bill.
Yeah.
We get a Saanich tax bill, a Victoria tax bill, etc. And so what I view my role as the vice chair of this committee now, this was a position that I was kind of elevated to, grateful for it, and going to do my best in that role. I cannot simply be a cheerleader for the process. I have to provide scrutiny and oversight with what's going on. And I feel that the content of what we do, what we develop, is important. And the process informs that, but we shouldn't be supporting the process at all costs. And a large part of the difficulties we've had have been these imposed federal deadlines on us. We've been working in the last year to an unrealistic artificial deadline.
So in terms of providing scrutiny and oversight, What's the IRM? There's a new task force, and it's called the Integrated Resource Management Task Force. You're on it. It's only 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, had 3 meetings, and it's going to determine whether an integrated resource management approach, IRM, can offer the benefits of substantially reduced net costs and substantially reduced environmental benefits. So what is IRM in terms of sewage treatment?
Well, the IRM concept comes from a provincial government study from 2008, Integrated Resource Management, and it was to look at the byproducts of these treatment processes as resources, something that you could do something with, rather than simply as waste to dispose of. And that's what we do now with sewage, right? We flush it into the ocean, it's a waste. Or we landfill it, and it's a waste. Or we don't do the things that they've been doing in Europe for a long time, converting them into gas or to energy or electricity. Yeah, it's to take essentially what we are producing as byproducts and use them again in another process. And it could be water reclamation. It's basically not to waste and throw away what we put into the system. It's essentially it's a reuse or recycling of it. And you need an integrated system to do that. You have to have something at the back end that's compatible with the front end to be able to produce that. So in terms of water reclamation, you need tertiary treatment to get the water to that standard so that you can put it into a pipe network or into a building like Dockside Green or do something with it. So the task force was established out of a strategic plan process that the CRD adopted last year, and it's a small committee that meets every Fridays at the CRD at 8:40 in the morning to listen to experts and to talk about where the status is of integrated resource management in the world and to see how we can bring this to our project and ultimately to make a recommendation to the CRD board. And then we're going to have the challenge of how to integrate that into the liquid waste and solid waste committees that currently exist.
Well, in terms of integration, I mean, my understanding of integrated resource management, basically you integrate 2 waste streams, the liquid one and the solids that come out of that liquid, and you basically combine them with the solid municipal waste, and everybody knows that as basically Heartland. And you derive you process that in a way that you derive energy from and other products. So in terms of integration, is it possible to optimize integrated resource management when it's sort of an add-on to a wastewater treatment system rather than it being the foundation of the whole system's design?
It should be done from a foundationary approach. And when you go back to that original document in 2008, the IRM report that the province commissioned, it talks about how to get started on this process. And it was to take the liquid waste plan, the solid waste plan, the community planning, water demand, all those things, and to be able to put those together at the beginning and see how you could mix them together and merge them together.
Integrate them.
To take it another step is to then take the individual waste streams themselves and to see if you can find technology that can deal with more than one at once. And this is what's come forth with this idea of gasification, where you could take the sewage sludge that's partially dry, you can take wood waste, you can take municipal solid waste, and instead of sending them to 3 separate places and essentially having to pay for it 3 times, you could send it to a single unit, a single waste to energy unit, and produce some energy from that and get some resource recovery on it and reduce the cost of sewage treatment at the back end that you would be paying if you did it otherwise. So let me give you just a concrete example here. So sewage sludge that would come out of the treatment plant would go to an anaerobic digester and it would cook down with bacteria, and that would turn into biomethane, and that would go into, say, the Fortis network and use it to power our furnaces and hot water heaters and things like that. The garbage currently goes to the landfill, but there's a lot of energy content in it. And it's the same even with recycling. Plastics and things have a lot of energy. Kitchen scraps, where do those go? Well, those currently leave the region. There are various combinations that make sense economically to combine those in various ways and put them into existing technology, and then you'd simply pay one tipping fee in order to deal with it. And that's where a savings comes in for the taxpayer.
So the Sewage Committee is going to make a concrete decision on February 24th in order to get approval for a revised and amended liquid waste management plan. So my assumption is that concrete means technology selection, and as you know, per the project charter, securing sites for all facilities, both wastewater treatment and resource recovery. So is that your assumption about what constitutes a concrete decision on February 24th?
No, not at all. I think on February 24th, we're going to come back out of public consultation on what is essentially a discharge strategy, which is these are the various ways you could discharge secondary and a combination of secondary tertiary treated effluent into the ocean and there's no technology that's been specified to date. The public won't be weighing in on any technology, and it's certainly not going to go into a concrete plan as of yet, because we're a number of months behind our original schedule and we haven't adjusted for this, trying to meet this impossible P3 deadline in March, this P3 Canada $83 million funding deadline. It's actually it's the smallest part of the project in terms of funding. It's $83 million out of 800 or more million dollars, but it's sort of hamstringing us right now. What's expected to go to the province will be a letter basically explaining what we plan to do at this stage, but I don't think we're going to be submitting an amendment anytime in February or March.
Okay, so a letter, in theory, if so that's February 24th decision. The Integrated Resource Management Task Force is to report out by February 29th.
Yeah.
So if they come out with an enthusiastic 2 thumbs up to integrated resource management, but in order to optimize it, a lot of the sites that are currently under review will have to be changed. A 100% level of tertiary treatment, and even the energy extraction sites, wherever that's done, as you mentioned, gasification, they might have to be identified, and they're different from the sites that people that are currently out there. So you're not concerned about getting locked into a February 24th decision. That would be too. Then if we've got, like I say, good news on February 29th, you think we're okay there?
No, I think it's a huge problem still. When we hired the consultants to help us this last year and forward on this project, we gave them an understanding that we wanted some goals met. And when it came to resource recovery and those technologies, they have not produced enough information to my satisfaction. They've produced kind of a ballpark cost of about 263 to 412 million or so, but there isn't really anything in the reports backing that. And what they're suggesting we do is we go out to the market later, at some later date, to figure out what they have. That's not the integrated approach.
For me, when I hear about the approach they're taking, if hard decisions are made on the basis of the front end, the wastewater treatment, and then you're told that at a later date you might be able to bring in some innovation through the procurement process or some of what the vendors have to offer, for me it's a bit like getting the opportunity to put lipstick on a pig.
Yes.
I mean, in the sense that you've really picked a pig of an initial option, but you'll be able to sort of beautify it a bit at the back end. Throw in a dash of integrated resource management, throw in a bit of innovation courtesy of the vendors. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, and that's what was done with the old McLaughlin project in the run-up to trying to get the rezoning for that site at McLaughlin Point in Esquimalt. A tertiary-like add-on was then put onto the end of that design for an extra estimated cost of $5 million to, like you say, put lipstick on the pig, because it wasn't really going to deal with a lot of the microplastics and microfibers and other things going out into the ocean. It was essentially going to zap it with ozone.
It was an add-on.
It was an add-on. It wasn't conceived up at the front end so much. So one of the problems that we have with the way I think the design has been is that, for the public at least, it's very difficult for them to see the advantages of the options. They're all based on the same rock-based site, and they all cost a little bit more than the others. I think what we try to do, or should try to achieve, is when we hire consultants, what we want them to do is produce varied options. We want the apples to oranges that you and I can't compare ourselves. We can do apples to apples. It's very obvious to you and I that one plant that's $1 billion is going to cost less than a 6 plant at $1.3 billion. But it's the apples to oranges comparisons, the multi-plant designs to the one-plant designs, to the advanced energy recovery designs that really people want to see. And so if we start with the end product, what are we going to do with the sludge, and solve that and work backwards? I think we can work backwards to a number of sites that then come along with an informed public that then can make a decision based on some technical details that they can digest. And so it would make sense to them, having gone through this process, that, oh yeah, well, Clover Point wasn't my first choice, but I understand now why it's a good choice. And I understand why Rock Bay's not a good choice, or why McLaughlin's still a good choice. What we've been doing is going in the opposite direction. Basically trying to get the rezoning and the siting out of the way, then trying to put something on the site that we haven't seen anything in detail of yet. There's just a representative technology that we don't even know what represents, and then to deal the add-ons later. I feel, and having experienced this, is we're largely repeating what we did before on McLaughlin in the rush to get this $83 million.
Have you done the survey yet? There's an engagement survey out there that people have been asked to complete. Have you done it?
I've been to the first few pages, but I haven't completed it yet.
Okay, I did it, and it was an interesting one in the sense that there's 3 sections, and the first section is finding out some of your concerns about,
Right.
environmental versus cost versus truck traffic and so on. But then you're given the 7 choices, and you are told basically you have to narrow these 7 choices down to 1 to 3, or else you don't get to go to the rest of the survey. And I just found that so out of sync with what I understand to be some of the principles of, of public participation decision making, in terms of you provide people with the information they need to make a meaningful decision. And on this survey, there's no information about some of these other options that you've brought up. As I say, you're forced to make a choice in order to get to continue in the survey, and I found it a bit disrespectful. I had quite a lot of concerns. So
Yep.
when you fill it out, I'm not sure what your response will be to it.
And I've seen surveys like this before where they're forcing you to do an answer. I thought the promise had been made earlier that we were looking to inform the public and we were looking to get some feedback from them, but we weren't looking to ask them to make a choice on these sites. Now it seems like that has been put in there by the consultant doing the survey work, and if you can't proceed to the next step, it's going to force everyone to pick something. They're going to be basically sitting on that page wanting to advance and having to pick something right there and then, right?
Yeah, you have no choice. In order to go to the end of the survey, you have to make a choice between. You have to narrow down 7 down to 1 to 3. Just a couple of minutes left here, Mayor. Just very quickly, what role could a pilot project play in all of this?
It could do a number of things. So if you think about the solid waste end of things, it would be possible to do a pilot on the gasifier. And if the gasifier didn't work out for some reason, you would still have the anaerobic digestion as a backup. I think that's fairly low risk for even a government to take. It's usually the kinds of risks that the private sector takes, but I think in this case, there's so much savings, potential for savings, that I think it would be very foolish not to do that. On the wastewater end, what we want to figure out is through Colwood is how we can discharge into lakes and rivers and into the ground, just like they do in the interior. The interior, there's no ocean. So why do we have to discharge into the ocean? Why have we built this design based on ocean discharge? That doesn't make sense to me, and I think a pilot for that would be good as well. And there have been other projects in the world where companies have been invited to basically set up shop in an industrial area and bring their technologies in and showcase them and actually test them out and see them work. That'd be the third opportunity for a pilot. We're not doing any of these at this point, but hopefully the IRM task force will be able to push at least one of those to the CRD board for a decision.
Okay. Mayor Atwell, CRD Director Atwell, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, John.
That concludes this section of the CRD in Context.